How are you guys? Welcome back to Wargaming China, a free channel where I platform my understandings of the war of resistance against Japanese aggression in China from 1931 to 1945. I do this for wargamers, toy soldier enthusiasts, armchair historians, and people who like a bit of the obscure, but mainly for wargamers. Now today we're going to talk about my Japanese air support because to be honest, I broke my leg and I can't get up to my shed to get access to a lot of my material and modelling stuff, so I just thought, well, I'll just do one for today on my Japanese air support. Now, as a wargamer, as far as air support goes, I usually stick to my friend Terry's maxim that air support on the war games table should be pretty enough to offer a distraction, but not powerful enough to affect the game. Now, I've always remembered those words. I think they're very wise, and today is a perfect example of a plane that fits that role. Certainly a pretty plane that ate the Mitsubishi A5M, and with only carrying 2 light machine guns, it certainly qualifies. It's not going to win you the game. So let's talk about the plane itself. Well, it's an Ichimo kit. I think it's Japan. It cost me about, it was a gift from a mate. But you can pick them up online for about 25 bucks Australian. So it's a bit on the expensive side for a model, but still a pretty model. Now, it was first flown in February 35. And nearly 1,100 of them were built, and it entered service in 1936. And as soon as it entered service, every other monoplane in the world was outclassed, because the A5N broke the mold in so many places. First off was its range. If you gave it drop tanks, it was capable of a 1,200 kilometer range. And that is phenomenal, really, for the time period. Now, maneuverability. This plane could outmaneuver anything else in the sky at the time. The primal thing the Japanese Navy had asked for in this plane was range and maneuverability, and tough enough to survive life as a carrier fighter. That was what the A5 was designed to do. Now, Mitsubishi whacked a Nakajima engine into this, a radial engine, and they offered it for Navy service, but they offered this plane to the Army as the KI-18 and the KI-33, but the Army rejected it. Now, that was probably a mistake by the Japanese Army, because the Navy went on to build nearly 1,100 of these, and they were in service, as I said, from 1936 right until the end of the war, when they were put into the kamikaze use, which is a shame. Now, when this aircraft first got into combat, it met P-26s and Curtiss Hawk 3s, both of which it outclassed in every category. As I said, the range on this 1,200 kilometers. Now, the specification said for 800, but Mitsubishi gave a range of 1,200 kilometers. That was phenomenal for the day. Now, the first time this would engage in combat would be it would be engaging the P-26s and the Hawks, and these were the first monoplane dogfights that the world had ever seen. And some of these engagements were massive. The A5M, the Claude, only really made its match in China, when the Soviet volunteer group started arriving and putting I-15s and I-16s into Chinese service, and they were a match for the A5M, and but this was the plane that in December of 1941, American intelligence sources, whether they be Navy or Army, was believed to be the main fighter of the Japanese Navy. However, they were wrong, because the main fighter of the Japanese Navy in December 1941 was the Mitsubishi Zero. Now, called the Zeke in Western parlance, everybody knows this airplane as the Zero. It's probably one of the most iconic airplanes of World War II, and when it first took to the air in April 13, 1939, its performance was just superb, far above anything in service anywhere else in the world. Now, it first it goes into service in July 1940, right? And it has a range of 2,600 kilometers. Can you imagine that? 2,600 kilometers on a carrier fighter. That's an enormous amount of range. Phenomenal. So a Japanese carrier group could attack a target 1,000 kilometers away, send its Zeros there. They could engage a target, load over the area, and still get back home, because the range was 2,600 kilometers. Later on, it even jumped to 3,100 kilometers. With a speed of 565 kilometers an hour, it was a fast fighter. An armament of 220mm and 7.7mm was a serious upgrade in firepower as far as the Japanese Navy were concerned when it came to fighters. I mean, the A5 had two 7.7mm machine guns. So the Zero, when it entered service, was the best fighter in the world, and it was still the best fighter in the world at least until the end of 1942. Now, the first combat of the Zero occurs over Chongqing, and on that day, Zeros escorting bombers would shoot down 25 Chinese Air Force I-15s and I-16s. Some reports say 27. And if we look at the Japanese squadron that took part, formation that took part in that battle, by the end of their tour of duty a year later, they had claimed 270 kills, whereas Chinese sources would say, oh, it's about 75. Most sources believe it's just under 100. So in a year of combat against anything China could throw, the Zero had shot down 100, nearly 100 for no loss. Now, I say for no loss. There was 2 Zeros that fell into Chinese hands. One was shot down, and she was a wreck, but she was a fairly intact wreck, and the Chinese and Americans managed to examine that. But later on, in 1941, in September, a Japanese pilot landed at the wrong place, or seems to have. There doesn't seem to be any talk of combat. It just seems that he landed in the wrong area, navigational mistake, and he was killed, and the Chinese captured his plane. Now, this plane was flown by Chinese and American experts, and a big block of intelligence was sent to the US. However, the Zero flew on 100 octane fuel. China, in that region, was only producing 80% octane fuel. So they didn't really get the true story of the Zero. They didn't get to find out its true secrets, because the fuel just didn't give the performance of the plane. So it was only after I think the Americans captured one in the Aleutians and put it back. But it was only late in 42, that the Americans started to fly it themselves and reveal the secrets of the Zero. And as I said, the Zero was a top fighter at least until 1942. Its range of 2,600 kilometers would be kicked up to 3,100 kilometers. It would be outgunned in its time. And the sad thing is that the Zeros never could have adopted the dive and zoom tactics that were adopted by most nations to deal with it. The Zero didn't have a high dive speed, and as I said before, the Japanese Army Air Force and the Navy Air Force held dogfighting and maneuverability, speed and range to be the number one attributes that a fighter should have. And this is a fine doctrine if you're looking at the 30s, and you know, aircraft designs weren't. I mean, they were accelerating quickly, but not as fast as they would in World War II. But you know, a lot of people go, "Oh, the Zero didn't have armor." Well, it couldn't have got the range and maneuverability if it had armor. Although they did put some in later. You know, the Zero didn't have self-sealing fuel tanks. Well, when Zero was first in service in July 1940, I don't think any aircraft had self-sealing tanks, fighter aircraft anyway. So, you know, range, as I said, 2,600 kilometers an hour, and that's in 2,000 kilometers in range, 2,600 kilometers in range. Let's look at what the Luftwaffe fielded. They were fielding the M09, not even 700 kilometers range. So the Zero broke the mold in every single way it was asked to, but what let it down was it was designed for dogfighting, and as I said, thanks to Claire Chennault and the development of tactics, the dive, attack, zoom away, diving, attack, and zoom away, the Zero couldn't stand up to those tactics, and quickly obsolete by the end, you know, well, not obsolete, but just not good enough by the end of 1943, and finally relegated into the kamikaze role at the end of the war. I mean, we've all seen footage of Zeros in the doing kamikazes on American ships. Now, the third model I've got today is the first one that you'll see that I've painted the windows in. Now, most wargamers, when we build a plane, we like to put the pilot in, paint him up, put him in. But nowadays, a lot of the manufacturers don't give you crew anymore, so a lot of wargamers, we paint the cockpit and then just paint the detail on that. So we're looking here at a Hayabusa, Nakajima Ki-43 Hayabusa, and the Hayabusa's kind of the Army's answer to the Zero, but the Zero really does surpass the Hayabusa in just about every category. Now, the Hayabusa, the Army, as I said, even if the Army had wanted to get the Zero, production wasn't up with it. You know, the A5N was still on doing carrier duty up until 1942 because they couldn't produce enough Zeros. So you know, people say, oh, they should have got the Zero, but there was never the manufacturing capability for the Army to get the Zero. Now they settled with the Hayabusa, the Oscar, or the Peregrine Falcon, as Hayabusa means in Japanese. And it first flew in January 39 and entered service with the IGA in October 41. Now, by the outbreak of World War II and the battles over Burma, many of the members of the Flying Tigers were in aerial combat against Hayabusas, which they mistook as Zeros. And we can't blame it on the American pilots, because the Hayabusa wouldn't even have been in any American recognition books for them to know different, you know. The Hayabusa was armed with two 7.7mm machine guns. It had a max speed of 530 kilometers an hour, so it was 35 kilometers an hour slower than the Zero. It wasn't quite as maneuverable as the Zero. The only place where the Hayabusa excelled the Zero was that eventually they would get a range of 3,260 kilometers out of the Hayabusa with the use of drop tanks. So, you know, the Hayabusa had some good legs. The Japanese did love long-range aircraft. Perhaps if the Luftwaffe had a bigger love of range, they would have done better in the Battle of Britain. Because certainly when you compare the ME-109 to the range of any of these aircraft, the ME-109 falls well short. So the Japanese were very, very far ahead of the game as far as range would have got to go out of their planes. So again, this is a Hasegawa model. I picked it up for 20 bucks, which is for me a little bit expensive. That's the maximum I ever want to pay for a fighter, 20 bucks. But it's a nice kit. It went together well. It's a very strong cut, you know, suitable for war games. And I painted it in. Look, I just flipped from a book, saw a paint job that I liked, and thought I'll do that because you know you should. Even if I'd have painted it dead right for one scenario, it would be dead wrong for every other scenario I used it for. So you know, a lot of time using planes like that. Just have fun. Don't worry too much about getting the camo dead right for that certain scenario you're building it for, because when you want to field it in somewhere else, it'll be slightly wrong. So that's the first two fighters I've got, and now we'll go over to the bombers. Now I've only got one Japanese bomber, but it is a nice one, G3M Nell, and the Nell was first flown in July 35 and entered service in 1936. It had a max speed of 373 kilometers an hour and a range of 4,381 kilometers and a bomb load of 800 kilos. Now, because I'm not really, you know, we don't usually use bombers in war games, but there's some scenarios that call for the heavy bomber presence, especially you know, if you're doing it. Well, for me, I bought this for the opening days of the Shanghai 37. Where these were in service in Shanghai 37 August 14th, bombing I think it's Hangzhou and Suzhou, I think, off the top of my head. And indeed they served in the war up right until the end of the war. They were designed to have a torpedo slung underneath them. And again, this was another plane that when the Japanese Navy had put the specs out, what they wanted, Mitsubishi had far exceeded their expectations. Now again, this is a plane that you see mid-war. There was this idea in the 30s that your light bombers, fast, would get through, you know, but the British developed, I think it was the Blenheim for that purpose, and the Blenheim wasn't as good. It was slightly faster than the Nell, but you know, it didn't have as good a range. It's a comparable plane, but we see in 1940 Blenheim was getting shot down. I think in droves, because the design of a light, fast, lightly armed bomber was outdated, just outdated. These still did get to the action though. I mean, they were part of the forces that would sink the Repulse and the Prince of Wales off Malaysia, and certainly in service until the end of the war as a cargo plane. So there we go. There's my there's a brief expo of what I've built of my Japanese air support, and a little bit of info on it. I didn't go heavy on the info because there's books and documentaries and people that know far more about these aircraft than me. All I wanted to do was just make a quick video today, a bit of entertainment, and something that I didn't have to go up to my shed for. Alright, so there you go. If you like that, press like. Hey, I've got 106 subscribers now. I'm really pleased about that and surprised. Really am surprised. So if anyone else wants to surprise me and subscribe, that'd be great. Take care. See ya.